Alright, one more video for this evening. Before we wrap up the evening, I wanted to share with you guys a video about quality versus quantity of work, and how that's going to be a determining factor of what kind of mechanic that you are, or what kind of technician that you are. So what do I mean by that? Let's dig on in. So if your primary focus in this trade is to simply get everything in and out as fast as humanly possible, and you don't care about what else you can see in front of you or what's next to you, then you care more about quantity than you do quality. If your sole purpose is to torque every single thing down, look up every single spec, observe every single procedure, make annotations of every single thing that you see, and wait for approval, or send in schematics and take pictures and video and all that extra stuff, then you're probably going to be more about the quality of work. What my suggestion is to try to find some kind of happy middle ground between the two, because obviously you want to try to produce as much as you possibly can within that working day or that working week, but you don't want to sacrifice quality as a result of the quantity that you're trying to produce. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're just doing a simple oil change, and if you're just trying to fly through it, drain the oil, throw the filter on, stab the oil in and run it, then you're going to miss a lot of things that you potentially could have caught and submitted through documentation for potential upsells. Upselling is like a huge factor in the mechanic world, and same technician world, whatever you want to call yourselves. It's a huge factor. That's what actually not only gets you paid, but gets the shop paid, and that's how you find and produce more work. So if you would have taken a few extra moments out of your day or oil change, you would have noticed that if you would have taken a wheel off the front, wheel off the back, and you would have noticed that maybe the brake pads were getting down to nothing, and it was time to do brakes. Brake service is due. If you didn't walk back to the back of the car and shine a flashlight, around the back, you might not have noticed that cracked or brittle vapor tube hose, or that leaking shock, or that torn or deteriorated lower control arm bushing, or maybe you're in the front and you didn't notice that on this particular vehicle there were Zerk fittings made for grease. And in a lube oil filter service, you have to re-grease the fittings. That's part of the service. So there's that. And you want to make sure you wipe them off before you put the grease gun on there. That's just part of the quality of work. Setting tire pressure. It's a California law to set tire pressure, but so many times it's overlooked because a lot of the newer vehicles now have a TPM monitoring system. And on the instrument cluster, you can usually scroll through and determine what the tire pressure is based on the instrument cluster. And there's been maybe 2 or 3 occasions that instrument cluster has not always been accurate. And there's definitely been more than a few dozen occasions where the TPM light was on, but the tire pressure was actually good. But you wouldn't have otherwise known that had you gone around and checked every tire to include the spare, which the spare tire is most commonly overlooked. Which again, we're going back to the quality of work. If you see something leaking but you're unsure of where it's actually coming from, if it's a coolant leak, you might go and talk to the service writer or the shop foreman or the owner, depending on what shop you work at, and say, hey, I've determined that there is a coolant leak. I would like to do a pressure test. Is this something that we should get approval for before we proceed, or should I just go ahead and do it? And let them make that call. They'll let you know, but 9 times out of 10 they're going to tell you to go ahead and proceed. It's pretty important, to make sure that you understand where the coolant leak's coming from, so you can fix the car so the car doesn't overheat and cause further damage. So definitely a contributing factor as far as like the quality of work and going a little extra mile. But maybe that could have gotten you a couple extra hours because the water pump was leaking, or the upper radiator hose was leaking, or the radiator was leaking. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes if I'm doing an oil change and I don't see anything out of the obvious, but I see some oily residue around the compressor, I'll pull out my UV light. It takes a few seconds, just the same as using a flashlight to inspect things. I'll pull my UV light out, throw my yellow glasses on, take a look, And if I got a bunch of PAG oil all over the compressor and nowhere else, I'm going to recommend an AC service plus possibly changing out the compressor. So again, quality plus, you know, over quantity, and then you got your upsells. And upsells is what's going to provide you the additional work, which again brings your hours up, which we've discussed in a previous video. So, you know, don't be in a hurry to rush everything out just so you're focused on that 0.3 or 0.2 hours that you're getting for that oil change. Do the customer the quality of service and satisfaction of overlooking the entire vehicle to make sure that they're not going to need something down the road, and give them the option to decide whether or not they want to proceed with the repair. Do not be the decider for them. You know, like, oh, well, the interior and exterior of this car look beat to hell, and by judging them based off their car, I'm going to say they don't have any money, and I'm just going to bang the oil change out and send it because they don't have any money. And then, of course, you get the snobby guys that come in with their Mercedes or BMW or their Toyota Prius, and you're like, oh, they must have a little bit of money. I'm going to, you know, try to upsell this one. And so you start going through and skimping on everything, and oh yeah, you need this, this, and this. Maybe they don't buy anything because they're so frugal. So you can't judge a book by its cover when it comes to the car. I've seen people with cars that are practically hanging on by a couple of band-aids and a strip of duct tape, and customers willing to spend money to fix that car to keep it on the road because it holds some kind of sentimental value. And I've seen snobs or prudes come in with these expensive cars that could give a crap less if the engine was hanging on by one string. They're not fixing it because it costs too much for the car to begin with. So I've seen it both ways, guys. I really have. So just focus on the quality and try to produce the quantity at the same time. Try to find a happy middle ground. Again, you know, don't take 2 hours to do the oil change, but don't get the oil change done in 15 to 20 minutes. Try to find a happy median between the two. I would say like 45 minutes to an hour. That might be pushing it for some people, but for myself, I've found that that's like the most thorough way that I can go through a vehicle to give it the full test, the full inspection, the test drive, the, you know, checking of all the fluids or topping off of all the fluids, setting tire pressure, greasing fittings, measuring brake pads, taking wheels off, things like that, torquing lug nuts, putting the sticker in the window. Like, I feel like 45 minutes is like a really good, sufficient time for an oil change service, because it's so much more than just changing the oil. It's ensuring the lifespan of the vehicle by annotating all the things that are falling apart with that vehicle. That's all I got for this video, guys. Look, I hope it helped you to better understand how I feel about quality over quantity, and a little bit of suggestion as far as like trying to find a happy middle ground. I hope it helps out either the new guy, the older guy, or the intermediate guy. That's all I got for this video, guys. Thanks as always for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Deuces.